Hello everyone to SUSECON Digital 2020. My name is Benjamin Landorf and I'm going to run you through the SUSE Manager and SUSE Manager for Retail roadmap, subtitled IT Infrastructure Lifecycle Management for Everyone. Before we get to the actual roadmap, I had to get a couple of questions out of the way. The first question I usually get is, what exactly is SUSE Manager? What does SUSE Manager do? How does SUSE Manager help me manage my IT? And I get this question a lot, so I prepared something for that particular question, of course. And if you look at that picture, if you just imagine for a second, your IT department was an opera house or a theater, what you see here in the picture would be an inside view of SUSE Manager helping you manage your IT. So it's the view of behind the scenes, helping to set the stage, making sure that all the actors, all the musicians can perform to the best of their ability, and make sure that everything that they need, the stage, the lighting, the seats, everything around what they actually do is in place at the right time and whenever they need it and to perform. So that usually creates a follow-up question, and the answer to this is also on the slide. And the follow-up question is, how exactly does SUSE Manager do that? So the answer to this is infrastructure DevOps. And people usually go, yeah, I know DevOps means usually that development and operations work closer together, but how does SUSE Manager help with that? And that's true. That's the general meaning of DevOps. But we use it here in a more specific way, and I have to explain a bit about that before we go a bit further. So it means we treat the operations process basically, or we want to be able to treat the operations process as a development process, more or less. So we want to be able to apply the concepts, the tools that we have from development, things like versioning things like comparing things, cloning things, and rolling things back, stuff like that. We want to be able to use that tool set in an operations environment. And when you think about it, that's already possible in a physical world, of course, but it will be pretty costly and pretty time intensive to do, though. So if you want to roll back a change that you rolled out, and you would have to go and change the patching, whatever, that wouldn't be what we have in mind. So we are relying in SUSE Manager and SUSE in general heavily on software-defined infrastructure to do that. So all your infrastructure is not only a physical representation, but has a representation in software and configuration. And we're dealing with that as if it was code. So that makes it possible for us to bring a whole software lifecycle management process to the operations world. So we take the development process and apply it to operations. So once we have that entire lifecycle process in place, we can set up all kinds of things that you usually know from the software world, staging, deployment, and everything based on that. So then the next question that I have to answer is, why is this talk titled IT Infrastructure Lifecycle Management for Everyone? So I think we answered the question, why IT Infrastructure Lifecycle Management already, now to the for everyone part. So as I already mentioned, we're basically implementing a software lifecycle management process for operations, for infrastructure. And the goals for this process are health, compliance, security. And we are fully aware that this is nothing that you achieve once and then you have it for all time, but that's something that you have to continuously do. So it's a cycle, a life cycle, and there are multiple pieces, functions, functionality that we need or you need that we provide to achieve those goals. Just to mention a few: provisioning, patch management, configuration management, workload orchestrations, just a few of those building blocks. And so IT lifecycle, infrastructure lifecycle management. Now, traditionally, for SUSE Manager, there has been a sweet spot in terms of installation sizes. So the range usually from 50 to 5,000, where all this functionality is relevant. Below this installation size, usually there was no real need to automate the process that much, and 5,000 was just a threshold for installation sizes before or in the past. So when we thought about the future of SUSE Manager, of course, there's, as depicted here, as a vertical arrows. There are the natural developments or further developments, like taking what we already have, making it better, or applying it to new challenges, like going to the public cloud or containerizing workloads. But we discovered that there are some new developments that let us go beyond the so far natural limits of installation sizes that we've seen in the past. So both below 50 and beyond 5,000 in size, which come with a new set of requirements that we need to address and that we want to address. And to make this a bit more concrete, I've prepared two examples, both on the lower end and another one at the upper end, to illustrate what we mean by that and what kinds of features, use cases we're looking into. The first one is help my SAP goes HANA. So setting the stage for this, I'm an administrator. I have no Linux experience. Maybe I'm a Windows administrator. Those HANA boxes are the only SUSE or the only Linux we have in the company. So we don't really have much experience with all that, not much background. Nothing can go into production. Well, it's a HANA box, so it's business critical. Nothing can go in production if it hasn't been staged and tested before. And we have to follow SAP notes, best practices. So how does the SUSE Manager help you in that regard? So SUSE Manager installation is not just easy, it's super easy as it gets. We have all the best practices included in terms of salt formulas for SAP HANA and HA clusters. We allow you to stage your contents without scripting or CLI comments directly from the UI. We are public cloud ready, and we support containers. So that's one of the use cases, in this case, the smaller end, where SUSE Manager can be useful and where we are putting a bit of focus on. And we have another one, other end, from brick and mortar to bits and beacons, rebuilding the retail experience. So we're looking into retailers, and the stage here is you usually have only a couple of administrators and you have a lot of systems. And by a lot, I mean a lot, that it's getting more. So we're talking not 50,000, we're talking hundreds of thousands usually. We don't have only SUSE. We have a lot of different systems, Red Hat, CentOS, Ubuntu, Windows sometimes. We have bandwidth at the store. That's an issue. Sometimes we don't have a network at all. I want to avoid patching as much as possible, but it cannot be avoided. So if I want to have to do it, I want to do it as safely as possible. There's more. Our newest challenges, latest challenges is we want to offer a digital experience. So we need virtualization containers maybe, but I don't see that happening. So we need to roll out new service packs to all our stores. So far, we've only been dealing with cash registers, branch servers. Now we have all kinds of digital signage, beacons, cameras, sensors, what have you. We have some unique ways of helping the retail admin here. So we make it easy to fully automate it, rolling out these hundreds of thousands of stores with Salt. We scale with one server to 50K nodes, maybe even higher. We support monitoring your entire setup, both in-store and centrally. We support multi-OS. We make both offline as well as low bandwidth scenarios workable. We take the pain out of patching by allowing you to test and stage everything in labs and roll it out in waves. We know that something we call minion storm, like all the stores coming online at the same time, is an issue that is unique to retail usually. We don't have that in data centers, but we also support ways of handling that. And we help the application teams to build upon remotely manageable HA in the store, handle all the deployment, and even hook in IoT like Edge for managing and monitoring. So after giving you an overview of what we think the future of SUSE Manager is going to be in very general terms and with some examples of where our journey is going, let's have a look at what we did in SUSE Manager 4, what's new there. So we implemented content lifecycle management to allow you to more easily stage everything in development, get it through QA, and then in production. A couple of screenshots to show you how that looks. Of course, you can first set up a content lifecycle management project, then define everything that goes into this project in terms of channels by filtering and selecting which channels to build on from predefined channels and your own channels. You can mix all that together and define new channels from that, and then make it available to individual nodes or groups of nodes. We also support monitoring based on Prometheus and Grafana in 4.0. We support in deploying the servers, and of course we show the results in the predefined Grafana dashboards. Something you already mentioned, we now are able to manage SUSE Linux Enterprise Server for SAP using Salt, either single instances or clusters of those nodes together. We support virtualization management. That's mostly, for the most part, for retail stores, relevant to retail stores. These are usually smaller deployments. It's also relevant to a part in the SLES for SAP, SUSE Linux Enterprise for SAP scope. If you want to completely virtualize the underlying hardware, make better use of the hardware underneath, then that's the virtualization management that we offer here for you to separate get multiple separate instances out of one huge box, and you can run it SUSE Linux Enterprise for SAP or HANA instances on. We extended in 4.0 the number of operating systems, third-party operating systems that we support. Ubuntu LTS, OpenSUSE, Leap 42.3 and 15, and CentOS 6, 7, and 8. We made SUSE Linux Enterprise Server 15 a base product. So that's, for one, consistent with other SUSE Linux Enterprise-based products like SUSE Linux Enterprise for SAP, already mentioned. And that means we have one compact installation medium for all. As we're going to see in 4.1, this has more side effects, more positive side effects than just having SUSE Manager and server and proxy and retail branch server now in the same installation medium as SUSE Linux Enterprise Server. Okay, being able to use that to install. So there's more to it, but that's the obvious initial thing people notice, that SUSE Manager is now comes with SUSE Linux Enterprise Server 15. So what we are currently working on for SUSE Manager for 1, which is going to be released late July 2020, is first off scalability and performance. So if you think about the retail use case I outlined, it's obvious that to support that kind of size of an installation, as of today, we have to have multiple servers in place to manage that many clients, and of course proxies in between. And that already works to a degree, but it doesn't give you a centralized management of everything that's going on in your organization yet. So besides the numerous performance and scalability improvements, we're also working on an architecture change underneath that's going to allow multiple servers that you need for huge installations to integrate, to connect to a centralized hub that can be used to manage the common assets for those servers and to get a centralized reporting view, that kind of things. So that's something we're working on. That's a journey. We start with 4.1, and that we are going to have to continue in later versions, obviously. So we are not going to be done in 4.1 with everything we have in mind. But we're laying the groundwork here to scale for the large and very large environments even better than we do now. We are obviously looking at UI and UX improvements. If you think about the lower end of the scale, if you have systems with fewer than 50 nodes to manage, we have to make it as easy as possible and as straightforward as possible for those systems to be managed. So that's something we're looking into in various places. We are going to focus on the two use cases, SUSE Linux Enterprise for SAP and applications and public cloud in particular. So one of the bigger changes is that we're going to support, and that's a direct consequence of public cloud use case here, we're going to support a mass onboarding of passwordless clients. That's a typical public cloud scenario that you're facing. So you're going to have certificate-based onboarding process here. And we're building quick start guides for, in particular, SUSE Linux Enterprise for SAP applications and SUSE public cloud use of SUSE Manager. Another big thing in 4.1 is going to be cluster awareness. So far in SUSE Manager, we've been managing individual nodes and groups of nodes, system groups. There's a conceptual complexity that comes with managing clusters on top of just looking at a group of nodes, because there's a kind of functional hierarchy in a cluster that makes it that requires certain actions, cluster-wide actions, to be taken in a certain order. That makes it not feasible to execute certain single node operations once certain cluster-specific actions are being taken. So, and in a sense, SUSE Manager so far is not fully cluster aware, so we don't know which cluster behaves in which way, an HA cluster, /SAP cluster, container Kubernetes clusters, stuff like that. We don't know exactly which node is the master node, and we're not aware in that sense. And so if you're an administrator of such a cluster, it's possible, currently possible, if you're not careful, to accidentally execute actions against nodes in that cluster that you shouldn't execute, and break some functionality of the cluster that way. So we're working on becoming cluster aware, and we have a cluster awareness framework, because in a sense, all clusters have a set of common functionality, common properties, and that we create this layer of abstraction and integrate, based on that abstraction, we integrate concrete clusters. And the first one we're going to do in 4.1 is going to be SUSE Container as a Service Platform, CASP for short. And we have others already planned with no concrete date or version, like SUSE Enterprise Storage and HA/SAP to come next. So those might also fall in the 4.1 timeframe still, not in the GA release, but maybe in one of the dot releases. We might come up with support for that. Virtualization management also already mentioned to a degree. So we're going to support multi-tenancy distributed virtualization through a reference architecture. So that's already possible, but we're going to provide a how-to guide on how to achieve that. We're going to support AutoIaaS booting and PXE support. We're going to have some advanced performance configurations for SUSE Linux Enterprise for SAP. We have a couple of more things like automated storage setup planned, not for GA, but again for one of the dot releases later on. And we're going to have patch automation. So we're going to allow you, on the one hand, to define patch windows, which is going to make it impossible to accidentally apply patches outside those patch windows. And we're going to let you automate the patching, so you don't have to run the patches, apply the patches manually, so they can, once the we get to the patch window, they can be applied automatically for you to the system that you designate. Some smaller items, mostly for retail. SUSE Linux Enterprise 15 image building support and better support for small branch operations. That's usually the case where you have only a couple of devices and you have a low bandwidth to actually get the patches there, but you don't want to run a separate server in the store, retail branch server in the store. So we're coming up with a couple of scenarios to make that easier to manage centrally, and some monitoring improvements, again, also for retail. So we're looking into automated setup, especially for federated environments. We want to aggregate information from multiple sources, stuff like that, which is currently possible, but we're going to make it easier to set up. And something I already talked about when we talked about 4.0, making SUSE Linux Enterprise Server 15 the base product. So that change we did with 4.0 gives us the opportunity to change our, or required us to change our support model a bit, because SUSE Linux Enterprise Server has a regular support interval of 1.5 years, and we support a specific version of SUSE Manager for 2 years. So now that we coupled SUSE Manager versions to SUSE Linux Enterprise Server versions, or specific server packs, we initially for 4.0 we need to support the underlying OS for half a year longer. That's the topmost box here that you see. So 4.0 comes with a half a year LTSF, if you like. For 15 SP1, we call it Expanded Service Pack Overlap support. And for all the versions starting with 4.1, we extended that by 3 additional months, because we realized that we would offer our customers the opportunity to actually skip individual versions. So if you're coming from 4.1 and want to skip 4.2, we want to give you that opportunity by giving you additional 3 months for that migration once 5.0 comes out. Otherwise, 4.1 would be followed by 5.0 immediately, and there would be no time for you to migrate. Again, we added additional supported platforms. So obviously OpenSUSE Leap 15.2, CentOS 6.7.8, Ubuntu 20.04 LTS, Oracle Enterprise Linux 7 and 8, and starting with 4.1, we are going to support modular repositories in Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8. As stretch goals, we're looking into Debian and Amazon Linux too. But I don't have any indication as of yet whether we're going to actually make that stretch goal. So a little outlook, what's coming after SUSE Manager 4.1, what we're planning. So we are, of course, plan to expand on the cluster awareness that we already built in 4.1. So we add additional cluster instances, SUSE Enterprise Storage, high availability, virtualization. We're going to add additional functionality, so not only looking into day 0 and day 2, but beyond that. We're going to build upon the hub functionality we're building into 4.1 to improve scalability, and we're planning to become fully containerized ourselves with 5.0. Little overview on the timeline of the highlights. I want to just go over 4.2 that we're currently planning. So again, configuration management, product integrations, supported platforms, security and compliance is a big issue for us, and obviously software-defined infrastructure management. So one of the top things here is multi-cloud capabilities, more virtualization management, and optimizing edge IT infrastructure. And again, monitoring troubleshooting as a cross-cutting concern. For retail, that looks a bit similar. So we're looking into managing more IoT devices in the store, multicast support, software-defined infrastructure, again, edge IT infrastructure management, hardware asset management, and of course monitoring with a focus on software asset intelligence, log management and alerting. That's my presentation. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed SUSECON Digital 2020 and talk to you next year.